So for this one, you can sit, you can remain seated, okay? Let's just take a position of prayer and reverence. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in God from Satan the accursed. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. O God, shower thy mercies on Prophet Muhammad and his descendants, as thou hast showered thy mercies on Father Abraham and his descendants. Verily thou art the praiseworthy, the glorified. O God, shower thy blessings on Prophet Muhammad and his descendants, as thou hast showered thy blessings on Father Abraham and his descendants. Verily thou art the praiseworthy, the glorified. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar. O God, give us to live in this world and give us to live in the hereafter, and save us from the torment of the hellfire. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Razi. And last but not least, I always have affinity to the Hindu religion, because my father came from India. And my father gave us stories on boat, where they live like brothers and sisters on this boat. Right? There's like big man like me. To I be akela, to jai be akela. This zindagi, do din ke mila. What does it say? You are alone come in this world. And this world is full of fun and laughter, la mila. But one day when you go in, is you alone after. No one ever go. So at this point in time, I'd like to call my good friend, Chief Elder Feet Group. I will give us the prayer. When you're in the military, you can get Hindu, Christian, what kind of religion. We don't need a pastor or a pandit, no, or imam, no. You only imam.
People will see it. I must say, welcome to this, the 24th April, the anniversary for the Army Mutiny, so to speak. I now please bow your heads and I render Hindu prayers. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mitroma Amitam Gamaya. O Lord, from the unreal, lead us real. From darkness, lead us to light. And from death, lead us to life eternal. Om Twameva Mata Chapita Twameva, Twameva Bandhu Chasakha Twameva, Twameva Vidya Dravinam Twameva, Twameva Sarvam, Mama Deva Deva, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Bhu Shanti, Antarikam Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Apa Shanti, Aushadeva Shanti, Vanaspati Shanti, Vishwadeva Shanti, Brahma Shanti, Sargam Shanti, Shanti Ripa, Shanti Sama, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. O Lord, let there be peace in the heavens, let there be peace on earth, let peace reign with us now and forever. We beg us in your name, your mother and father God, your Mikana Creator. We thank you for life, health, and strength. We thank you for bringing us together here today safely to celebrate this day and to let the country know exactly what went on the 21st of that fateful day, April 19th century. So I ask you all to please bow your head and give praise to thanks. Please praise thanks to God that we all are here today safely. Thank you very much. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Very good.
Thank you very much. Look, that's wonderful little discourse. Bhagwanji bless you. Bhagwanji bless you and keep you on the straight path. Thank you. Really, really good. Madam, how is it good? Thank you very much. Let person again with our national anthem, please. Let's all stand. Who don't understand, you replace ourselves.
One.
you very much, Dominic. Please be seated. Besides those receptionists at the back, can we have all the brothers have a seat, please? Come on, McGee, advance we recognize. You have place up here in front. Look at special area in front of your advance. Yeah. Would somebody be kind enough to close that door, please? Right, please turn around, let's press on. My dear beloved brothers and sisters, every year, we have some of my brothers here, including myself, the Admiral, and all of us, were there in 1970. And in fact, we were there in 1963, in the form, so we can tell you about the problem. But what we find every year, we have a small get together. This year, we want to have, we intend to have a big get together. And praise the Lord, would you believe, as we say go, most of the brothers and sisters, they contribute everything free. Everything free for us here tonight. We get everything free. Everything, we get everything free. Praise the Lord. Right? And thank you very much for all those contributing to make this a good success. Thank you very much. Now, the reason why we have this invited you all, you know, every year, nobody talks about the 24th of April, 1970. Nobody talks about that. All they hear about the Rafi Chan, La Salle, and Bazi and them. Very good. But nobody says anything about the Coast Guard. Nothing. And I'm asking you and I'm telling you, what if these fellas are taking over? Do you know what happened in the country today? But we have to maintain that history and let it go down to every citizen here. Because the ordinary citizen does not know what happened in 1970. All they know is mutiny and that's it. What about months the Coast Guard men, we started bombing the hills. You hear everything just now. We started bombing the hills to stop Lashal and Shah and them from coming on. Besides that, what do they do? In the morning before the mutiny, we had to line up before 4 o'clock in the morning. To run for a state to catch our old truck, and then there's a truck with the transport, the doctor stolen bait. And who received you? This man received it because he was on duty night before and they declared a state of emergency. And they didn't, at that point in time, they did not mutiny as yet. Always getting ready to go to Nelson Island. Look at the picture here still. Well, all the boys get ready for Nelson Island on the same Trinity. We have to guard men like Granger and George Weeks and Dave Dabro and all these Ugandans. And this big shot today, they get every year they get millions of dollars to celebrate what? What we just get partner? Nothing. And we give our life to the country. Look at this man here. Look at the Admiral. Look at Smiley. Boy, give people here. Limping. And we're Riley. There was a man called Riley. Riley was here. Riley still have a 38 bullet stick up in the waist. Alive, still stick up. So this is how the Coast Guard operate. The silent. We are the silent. What do you call it? The silent one? The silent unit? Yes. So let's just give a brief synopsis. So, my dear beloved people, I'm so happy to welcome you all, right? So happy to see you all, and my heart gets so very big. You know why you come here for? Because you love the Coast Guard. You love the Coast Guard. You don't love the money. You love the Coast Guard. But today is a different story. A job is a job. Long time the job was different for us. Long time our motto was what? God first, God, country, and then unity. So when people didn't, no officer couldn't give us a bad order. You know why? There's a thing called an illegal order. No officer can get a bad order. You're not supposed to obey. Not so be but Good. So, brothers and sisters, I'm saying again, I wish and I'm happy that, okay, welcome the press. This is Sebastian from the Guardian and Brother Rock from the TTT. I want to welcome you all personally, right? And feel free to ask for anything. Because it's time we get some kind of, yeah. And we need to get something done. Because the Coast Guard is silent when it is too silent. We are not politicians. We are the voting men. So, without much ado, on my left is Lieutenant Andre. He was the engineer of said Coast Guard at the time, and he is the man who was there responsible when he declared the state of emergency at midnight on the 21st of April 1970. So, without much ado, I'll put you under my dear friend, my colleague. Hello, I'm on safety courses again.
I was just doing my job. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. Now, I am not supposed to be the feature speaker, but I was right in the middle of everything. This 21st of April, 1970. But before I get into any kind of details, I want to just say hello to the two former ministers, Bukaran and Tuwari here, to say thanks for your presence here this afternoon. But please, brothers and sisters, do not expect any revelations that will sparkle your insight. My status of I am going to tell you what I thought, what I did, and what I could have done, which I didn't do, thankfully. But before I do that, I think it is only proper to spend a couple minutes and permit me to do a roll call. I have all the names here of every single member of the Coast Guard on that fateful day. And if you are still alive and with us here this afternoon, please acknowledge. And I will start. Mr. Richard Kelshaw, not here yet. Mr. Anthony Franklin. If we are passed on to the great beyond, somebody say, please. Bernard Brash, he has gone on. Curtis Roach, not very well, I understand. And he's in Tobago. Patrick Andre, that's me. But most people call me Paddy Andre. Very few people know me as Patrick Andre. So it's Paddy Andre. Right. Edwin Asing. I'm not hearing you all. Edwin Asing. Loudly. Let's honor these people who gave their lives to the Coast Guard. Edwin Asing, Samuel Cox. Dennis Ledgerwood. Emmanuel Forbes. Sheriff Mohammed. Egbert Thompson. Donald Mohammed, Ian Cross, Kendrick Jasper, Lincoln Farry, Earl Phillip. Now that is only officers' names I've called there. You see how many have left us and gone on. The ratings, I'll go very quickly through the ratings, who at the time of the presentation of this medal was still with us. Cecil Kocho, Daniel Bob, Ignatius Melville, Horace Williams, Wilbert Keith, Sotero McEachran, alive, Claude Joseph, Andrew Cummins, Hilton George, Ron Koa, James Bailey, Ellis Thomas, but not well, Errol Toussaint, Robert Ramroop, Hugh Griffith, David Winter Roach, Terence Haynes, Talbot Monsanto, Maurice Sweet, Everett McCollin, Gorby Cesar Singh, Mervyn Frederick, Steve LaFleur, Christopher Pierre, Sidney Alexander, That's fine. Harry Charles, Victor Martinez, Cecil Thomas.
Yeah.
Very, Cecil Thomas. Victor Mackenzie.
On.
Irvin Lee. He migrated to Canada. I don't need that. Garrett Hackett.
On.
Neville Stewart. David Guy. Leroy Warner. Roll Roberts. Carl Winston Bailey.
On.
Patsy Rudolph. Stedman Duncan. Hollis Clark. Lennox Duncan. That's a Batiste, Mr. Batiste, Robin Fulton's name. Carly Gonzalez. He's been referencing for a number of years. Still keep in touch. Lennox Smith. Anthony Rojas. MacDonald Ashby. Carl Charles. Churchill George. Sheikh Shahadu. When Sheriff sent me the invitation to this function, I went to file at I have at home and pulled this out. And when I began to look at these names, a great sadness came over me. To look at all these brothers, even those posthumous awards that day. And it was really sad and went straight to my heart to think of all these little gentlemen who were there on that fateful day and who were willing to give their lives in the service of the country. So let me begin by going back a few weeks before that fateful day, 21st April 1970. It was the Thursday after Ash Wednesday of that year, 1970. 26th of February, 1970. My ex-wife was working at the Royal Bank in Independence Square in Port of Spain. Called me to tell me there's a riot in town, black power people come in the bank, the rowdy, the jumping on the counters, all that. I promptly went to the commanding officer, Captain Bloom, and told him. And from that day until 21st of April, when it came to a head, we never went home on time. Never, not one day. We were all there, always waiting till about 6 o'clock or so for an all clear from Port of Spain so that we can go home. And nobody never complained. Never had a complaint from any Coast Guard person. Back then, we didn't have female Coast Guard personnel. But we stood our ground, and things went along the way, bad to worse, kept then riots and this and that. But, let me come to April 21st. I left on the afternoon before to visit the dentist, but I was told, expect a call during the night. Got the call, and before 4 o'clock I was at Stobelshed. It was midnight or something. And I was stationed at Shaka Cabana, that gate there, with, I must say, a motley crowd. Because I can't remember all who were there. I remember Gonzalez was there, Masanto was there, but it was mostly made up of technical personnel. I had the engineer officer, and we were all equipped with maybe not more than 2 those old Enfield 303 rifles, a few those Enfield 38 revolvers, we used to call them blunderbuss, and that was it. Lo and behold, the army, they started work at 7 or 7:30 or something. And I was there from early o'clock, and my orders were to let them all come in, don't let anybody out. So, lo and behold, up comes Major Christopher, who was second in command of the army. And he looked at me in great surprise and said, "Paddy, what are you doing here this hour in the morning and with weapons?" So I saluted him. I said, no, nothing, sir, just a normal exercise. We just doing a little exercise and so on. Nothing to worry about. But that was the first indication that something was not right. I immediately went to the phone. We didn't have cell phone then. Went to the phone in Cabana, called the office, spoke to Captain Blue, said, sir, something is not right. Major Christopher just passed here and he doesn't have a clue what is going on apparently. And they kept coming in, and then a couple of the officers of the arms came in. Mike Baz was one of them. Hey, Paddy, what are you doing here this hour of the morning? And well, I said, just an exercise, nothing to worry about. And next thing, I let everybody in. One of the ministry, civilian staff, the lady who was in charge of the staff, coming in, saw me. Hey, Paddy, what's wrong? Why are you out there like this hour in the morning, just like that and with weaponry? I said, nothing, just... I called again and said, listen, something is terribly wrong. Nobody going in there seemed to know that a state of emergency is declared or has been declared or was going to be declared. Next thing was boom. So I said, what the hell is going on? Ran to the phone again, called up. My orders changed. Don't let anybody in or out. All the soldiers coming in, arrest them, put them in a corner, sit down, guard them. If anybody misbehaves, we're not allowed to shoot. So I was there with my little few weapons and a few men who were not all that trained with weapons and so on, but we were there. So now I had to guard these soldiers we put on the ground. And then another clue, the intelligence officer, the sergeant, and the corporal came up to me. They came up and I stopped them and said, sorry, you can't go in. He said, Mr. Andre, what happened? Why not? I said, please get out of the car and go and join the rest of them. But they complied. And all these little incidents now kept adding up, that something was not right. But when the gunfire started, I realized it was really serious now. And I stood my ground there with these few men, with these old weapons. And next thing, I'm up and down towards these guys on the ground with their hands on their heads, back there looking to make sure nobody's coming out. And I hear a shot near to me. And when I looked up, Mac Masanto had a rifle, 303 rifle, and he said, sir. So everybody got on the alert now and wondered, well, what happened? There was this soldier in uniform with an SLR in his hand coming towards us, not in the road, but along the seashore, coming running. But Masanto, with his training or whatever, as we would say, put a shot across his bows. And this fella froze. And if I'm not mistaken, one foot was up in the air like that when the shot was fired. And he froze and started to beg for his life. And I went up to him, told him to put the gun down. He was shaking like a leaf. Eventually, I wouldn't tell you how I did the rest of it, right? Anyhow, I disarmed him. And we dispatched him with the other soldiers to the ship, one of the ships, I don't remember which one. When I joined the ship eventually, we were told to withdraw because it was getting a little bit heavy, starting to come up. When I got to the ship, and this is another clue to what took place eventually. I saw him and he came up to me and said, sir, thank you for not shooting me and killing me. So I said, who are you? He said, I'm the soldier who you stopped there and gun. I said, boy, what's wrong with you? You have a loaded weapon in your hand. You come in running towards us. You don't afraid you'll get killed? He said, sir, I only joined the army last week, you know, as a bandsman. I come from the orphanage. So I told myself, I said, but how could someone, an officer or whoever, put a loaded SLR in that person's hands, and he was saying, told him, we're going down to take over town. That's his orders. And he just took off. And he ran from Tetra Bay to Stowell's Bay, come along the shoreline, ended up in my hands. Then again, I said, no, something ain't right. Something not right. So eventually, I won't bore you with some in between things, but eventually, when certain things happen, I don't want to call any names, certain things happened, I was instructed to go and oversee the release of the civilian hostages. This was done up at Crow's Nest up the top. This was after, well, the Admiral will tell you what happened in between there with all the Bofors and all. And when I went there, to my surprise, certain incidents took place. Rafiq was there, LaSalle was there, a certain Coast Guard officer was there. And they appeared to be taking orders from the Coast Guard officer. Everything that was said or asked, they turned to this person and said, sir, what should we do? Don't ask me the names, please. So I said, no, this thing looking really weird now. Very weird. Very, very weird. Well, I got the civilian people out and same, they're in charge of the thing, Miss Henry, I think it was, Henry. She said, Patty, why didn't you warn me here this morning? I said, I couldn't warn you. I'm sorry about what happened, but I couldn't warn you. So we got them out and all that. I reported back to Captain Bloom on what I had seen, heard, and subsequent to that, there were things that I saw, that I heard, I saw it with my own eyes, with my own ears, that I experienced day and night, that caused me to come to a conclusion that this was just not a mere mutiny. A mutiny is, you want to take over this base or ship or whatever, you take it over, you have accomplished what you've done, that's it. But everything started to unfold in such a way that I said, something, and we, the Coast Guard now, because of what was transpired, I began to say, who can I trust? I don't know who to trust. But Captain Bloom probably saw something in me and trusted me with certain information, certain tasks to do, which were not very pleasant. However, I must thank Coast Guard, Trinidad and Tobago government for sending me to Dartmouth, because nothing I have ever experienced in my life can compare with Dartmouth training. My life after the Coast Guard, when I went in the oil field to work, the number of times I had to use my training and expertise from the military to do things in the oil field that wasn't even my job. And as luck will have it, at one time, I had an operations manager who happened to be an ex-Royal Naval officer who went to Dartmouth as well. And when certain incidents happened and the union threatened to strike and shut down and everything, he called me, Paddy, go and sort this out for me. Not even my job, you know, nothing to do with my job. Paddy, go and sort it out. Of course I sorted it out. That's the job. That's how I was trained. So sometimes I'm asked about a whole lot of things. Certain things I would not say in public, I would say it in private. Many times, former Coast Guard, retired Coast Guard officers have offered to come and sit down with me to record all what I've told you here in a court, and also other things that happened during that time. And as the years went by, I often wondered why the truth is not coming out. As Sheriff was saying, oh, they interview Rafiq Shah. Every year on April 21st, they interview Rafiq Shah. They never really interviewed any of us until, what was it, a couple years ago, Richard, when they called and we went on the radio. It was about 2 years ago, right? That we were able to really speak freely about it. Every year's traffic, and I used to say, what nonsense this man talks. I was there. What he's saying is not true. And the papers publishing it now, like the truth all over the place. There was a court-martial, big court-martial, officers from abroad. We, meaning myself and others, were told to get dressed. We have to go and give testimony at the court-martial. Lo and behold, last minute, stand down, you're not going again. We are going again. But it is occasions like that. If we were to go in places to give evidence, maybe the truth might have come. But then, as I went along over the years, more and more, certain little revelations would come out every year when soldiers and officers from the army at that time were interviewed. And it dawned on me when I started to put one and one together and get two. The goal was always to take over the country. That was the goal from the beginning, to take over the country by Rafi Shah and Rex Assad. Bazi was only a string along. All the other officers seemed to be string along. Lassalle and Shah were the main people involved in this. And as I look back on a lot of things that I saw and heard during that time, I realized that they had who they had in mind for the position of president and who they had in mind for the position of prime minister. I even heard one of them, other ones, they're going to hang Eric Williams in Savannah. All this I heard. And I saw things that I still don't talk about. Just like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have learned a lot from the Coast Guard. I left the Coast Guard and went to Delhi. I had to leave because when Captain Bloom left the job, I couldn't stay. I don't go into do it. You could read between the lines. I couldn't stay. And I left and went into the oil field to work. And from my training, experience, expertise, knowledge that I gained in the Coast Guard, I was able to do a fantastic job in the oil field. I really, I'm not boasting on my own behalf, but I'm just saying, I was able to transpose things that I learned in the Coast Guard to the oil field and help them very, very much in accomplishing a lot of things. So ladies and gentlemen, I've said enough. I give the floor now back to Sheriff to introduce the feature speaker. I'm not the feature speaker, so let the feature speaker come and say his piece. And there's a part of the program for questions. It says questions and answers, but there will be certain questions I am not prepared to answer. I'll tell you that up front, especially with you know who we are. So, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention, the kind attention. And we'll go on with the rest of the program.
Thank you very much, brother. Thank you very much, short and sweet. I'll tell you something. That will develop more things to come next year. We can see. We'll do the course of the year. Right? Thank you very much. At this point in time, I want to welcome Mr. Dukaran and Mr. Botuari. Also like to welcome Professor Kumar. Well, Professor Kumar. Right. Professor UTP. Right? And when Mr. Mayhew here? Mr. Mayhew?
Thank you.
Right here. I'd like to welcome Mr. Mayhew. Thank you very much. So my dear brothers and sisters, you hold from the horse's mouth. At this point in time, I would like to invite Mr. Butwari, can you give us a couple minutes, please? Yes, you're raising your hand. Come say something.
This is a little awkward than you might expect. I don't think in a forum like this anybody should really say anything after the officer just speaking, nor should they speak before Commander
Admiral
Kelshon. But I will say this, during those, I was not here for 1970, I was at the university, but I was at Queen's Royal College in the years 1960 to 67. And those were transition years for the country, and they were transition years in QRC. You could feel in Queen's Royal College the shift from a colonial order to a yearning for a spirit of independence. And you could sense it in the students, you could sense it in the teachers, you could sense it in the battle between tradition on the one hand and a yearning for a different kind of freedom on the other. So the tensions were there. There were two issues, I think, that happened with one teacher that were very interesting. One was the teacher came in one day in class and asked, which is the greater artist? Which is the greater poet? Shakespeare or Sparrow? And of course he put the class in a tizzy at that point, and we had a big debate, very interesting and so on. But it showed what was happening with the thinking. And another thing that happened was that had to do with the issue of identity. There was a fellow in my class called Brian Delmas, who was very much from French Creole stock. And this same teacher asked Brian Delmas once if he identified himself as a West Indian. And Brian Delmas was taken aback, and there was a little conversation, and afterwards it was conceded, yes, Brian Delmas had West Indian stock from across the islands, and therefore he was very much a West Indian. So those two issues of moving from a colonial time to another time, and the issue of what was the nature of identity in Trinidad and Tobago at the time, as everything was happening outside of the country, were very important considerations. And I say that being in the middle, because you heard a little bit about what happened on the day that the mutiny began. And you will hear from Admiral Kelshon his story, which I have never heard. And I came here, I thank Sheriff so much for inviting me to this event. And I particularly want to hear what the Admiral has to say. So, thank you very much, Sheriff, for giving me a few minutes. And thank you all for paying me the courtesy of listening to me, because I should not be saying anything here, really.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. At this point in time, let you know my brother in the University of London and Vincent Duggar became very good friends. You know, my brother in London, he was in charge of the plan. What do you call it? International students. They used to travel all over the world and recruit students for the university. And when I see Dr. Vincent Duggar here, I think about my brother. So I'd like to ask him, please come and say a few words.
First of all, I want to thank my friend Sheriff for asking me to be here and to have listened so attentively to what transpired on that significant day in the history of our country. So all I want to do here today is to say a word of praise to the heroes of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, April 21st, 1970, who are all dead. The story has never been properly told, but today we have a chance to listen. And it is part of our history, it is part of our being, that we have been able to overcome that and many other events that took place. So my words here today is to just say that we admire those who saved this country by their deeds, a sense of duty as part of the governance process of the country. It's something that's never been understood. That the military in all its manifestations, and my friend Admiral Kershaw and myself had a long relationship over the years, have never been recognized that they are part of the governance process of the country. And your part of the governance process is active with great consent of loyalty for Trinidad. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much. At this point in time, we have a Will example. Smiley? Right, I'd like to welcome the Admiral, and those who don't know, I know the Admiral before I joined you. We represented Trinidad in the Jamboree in 1960, not so? And there I met the Admiral. Young, handsome little boy, cowboy boots, and 2 guns on the side in the Jamboree. My father was the Assistant Commissioner of Scouts. The Commissioner was what? D.D. Ash, not so, that's the money. D.D. Ash. His father was the Assistant Commissioner of Scouts, good old days. And we developed a friendship from all these years. And later on he spoke, what are you doing? I say, go join the Coast Guard. I go join the Coast Guard. And he said, are you going to join the Coast Guard too? So we both joined the Coast Guard. But he joined as a commissioned officer, as a cadet officer, and I joined as an ordinary seaman, as a recruit. But maintained that relationship. And without fear of contradiction, many years later, he himself, the commanding officer, recommended me for a commission. And I got that commission. Thank you very much, sir. Right? So at this point in time, yeah, thank you. So at this time, but he's the man who incited me also. He's the man who incited me from the highest platoon. He said, let me form something bigger. And due to his initiative, the commanding officer, we formed what? The Special Naval Unit. And I be the first commander. Thank you very much. So without much ado, I want to give you my beloved friend, my trusted friend, right? Bandits together from way back in '62. Thank you very much. I'm glad to. Worked very hard. He had 4 decorations from Venezuela. Only have 4. I'm from Trinidad.
Thank you, Sheriff. Like pretty flashes, like me. When I look around here, I'm going to borrow a phrase from my friend Colonel Alfonso, Brigadier Alfonso, and twist it. It's a good day to be a sailor. See, familiar faces who worked with me, supported me, and who I later called the best bunch of men in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm even more pleased that my two mentors, both ministers, while I was serving as a National Security Advisor, are here this evening. Both advised, cajoled, helped me through my difficult time working with both Prime Ministers of the UNC. Both of them are probably the only person in the country that worked with both Prime Ministers. Anyway, I knew others. One of them was called Dr. Eric Williams, and I was assigned as his aide when the Queen was visiting Trinidad. I was a very young officer. I used to flatter me. He used to call me Captain. So anytime he wanted something done, he would say, Captain, do this, or Captain, fix that. The day arrived when Her Majesty the Queen arrived in Trinidad, and they took her on a long drive all the way from Piarco down to San Fernando, around Skinner Park, back up to Port of Spain and around the Oval where she attended a rally. I have to say, the lady had more stamina than I did. Anyway, when we reached Skinner's Park, part of the routine was to drive around the Skinner Park Stadium so that all the school children could see Her Majesty the Queen and wave flags and whatnot. And I was sitting in the front seat of the Prime Minister's car, and we led the procession. So we came in from the side and passed around, and to my horror, in Skinner's Park was filled with convent girls. Now, I was born in San Fernando, and I knew, is a good way to put it, a lot of those young ladies. And I could see from the front seat of the car that they saw and recognized me. So as the car and the whole thing approached, all the young convert girls came out and started to jump on the Prime Minister's car, beating, look Richard, look Richard, look Richard, look we boy. And they're patting up the car and they want to come inside to me. I have never been so embarrassed in all my life. But it ended, and we passed. And then the window between the back and the front came down, and the Prime Minister said to me, Captain, tell the police we're going wrong again. I said, no, Prime Minister, we're not doing that. He says, I'm the Prime Minister here. We are going wrong again. So I called the police escort, and around, this time they were waiting for me. And they didn't block the Queen's convoy, but they nearly did. Because now they could come right up to the window and shout, look we boy, and pat on the window. They were trying to get at me or something. And as we passed the second embarrassment and we were going out, the window came down again. I said, sir, not again. He said, no. We could tell the police we could proceed. I said, Prime Minister, how could you put me through that ordeal there with those girls? He said to me, Captain, you little ass. You think the people in the grandstand thought it was you they were beating up the car for? It was me they were beating up. So we were very good together, the PM and I. Anyway, let me just quickly jump in. I know you were late, and before I told you that story, I should have apologized for my lateness. Military are never late, and it certainly was not the fault of Woodruff who kindly brought me. Just before we left, my wife is doing chemotherapy for her second bout of cancer, and she was willing to come, but she just couldn't make it. And at the last minute, I had to divert and go to my son's house where I had to drop her off. So she is not here with me today at this function, which she would have loved to attend. And so that caused us to be somewhat late. But Sheriff never told me they had so much traffic coming in this direction. And we met that. Anyway, let me do what I was told to do when I came here. 1970 was the biggest event in Trinidad's history in the 21st century. It was an explosive situation that had the possibility to change Trinidad's history and cause a bloodbath that would have totally changed Trinidad's fun-loving people forever. We would have become as many African countries had, and we could have had military coups and bloody revolutions that continue to this day. Without a doubt, it was caused by my previous ministerial colleagues will forbid me, political incompetence, the Cold War, the racial upheaval in America and Canada, and last of all, greed, jealousy, the curse of power, and the lack of understanding of the military by the government of the day. It would take days to tell the whole story, so I'm just going to stick to one view. Before I begin, let me first thank Sheriff, or High Command as he's known. I first met Sheriff, as he told you, in a Boy Scout training camp in Whitelands, Gasparilla. Their troop built a shelter next to my troop, and we became friends. The year was 1960. Somehow we ended up in the same tent in the 1960 International Boy Scout Jamboree at Val-St. Park. There, we both decided that we would join the Navy. After independence, he beat me, and he joined as a sailor in the first intake to the Coast Guard. I was standing at the side of the road and watched with envy as he marched from the first Independence Parade to St. James Barracks 1 year later. 1 year later, I was also chosen to be one of the 2 officer cadets in September 1963. There were some 300 applicants, and George Arnold and I left for Britannia Naval College above them all. 2 out of 300. Sheriff did well in the Coast Guard, rising to Chief Petty Officer, and then in 1981 became an officer, then rising to Lieutenant Commander. That everybody talks about that as if it's nothing, eh? But to go through a whole career in the Navy, because it's 2 sets of structures. There's sailors and the other ranks, and then the officers. So to go through a whole career as a sailor, reaching Chief Petty Officer, and then stopping and starting again and going through another career, becoming a Lieutenant Commander as an officer, is not an easy feat, and very few men achieve it. This man did. Well, he's now Lieutenant Commander, entitled to be called Commander, but he has other names. He did 30 trips to Mecca. His real title is Haji. He built this center, nursing home, a school. He's a devout Muslim. For all of this, he was given a national award. He was also decorated by the Venezuelan National Guard and Navy. Now, he starts this tradition here that we all attend. This is a man above men. Bravo Zulu, Sheriff. The 1970 mutiny was part of a wider upheaving throughout the whole world. It changed Trinidad. It is probably an insult to call it a Black Power revolution, because it changed everything. Banks, unions, every part of the society changed as a result of that. I never speak about it because my particular expertise is in the Navy, and the politicians' expertise is what went on in 1970. So I'm out of my depth, and I won't go further than to say that despite what happened, that whole upheaval changed Trinidad and Tobago in a lot of ways for the better. And we mustn't forget that. All that happened that caused the problem was the demonstrations went the wrong direction. Because if we are honest, this man, Macandal Daga, or as we knew him, Geddes Granger, used to have 50,000 people transfixed in the squares. Transfixed. He was a natural orator. And if he had gone in the right direction, maybe he'd still be in politics today. We don't know. We don't know. But the thing went a wrong way, and it started to get violent. Business started to be burned down, looted, and the church was desecrated. And I think that prompted the Prime Minister of the day to say, enough, enough. We get the point. And he declared that there would be a state of emergency. That was declared on the 20th of April. The day before that, I left for Tobago with Captain David Bloom on the Trinity, because David Bloom was an ex-police officer, and he got intelligence from the police that there was going to be a massive, massive demonstration in Tobago. So Captain Bloom decided the Trinity would go up, spend the night in Storm Bay, and then go up to Charlottesville, where the demonstration was supposed to end. We took the Trinity up there the following day, and I heard the demonstration coming down the hillside. And it was a sound like no other sound. It was a sound that if you didn't hear it, you wouldn't know what it was about. It was a roar of people coming down the hill to Charlotte. And we were on the ship out in the bay, and I said to myself, this is so big that I don't think the police, the army, and the Coast Guard can handle what I'm seeing coming at us. It was a frightening thing, because it really was a large demonstration. We left, steamed back, and all the way I was sitting on the bridge of the ship saying, what is going to happen to my country? And who is going to control what's going on? Well, it was controlled, and that night, state of emergency was called, and the police were fast at work, collecting all the leaders of the movement and transporting them to Stobart Bay. So, by 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, all the officers of the Coast Guard were on board, fully kitted out for battle. The whole station was at action stations, and the sun was rising. And then, the army was coming to work in the morning. Now, they must have been very surprised to see the normal sleepy Coast Guard, as they used to call us, fully kitted out and ready for war. And they knew nothing about it. Nothing about it. And so this was one of the reasons that sparked the whole show. When they got to Tetron, the police special branch had been infiltrating the army for months before. Long before, they had been infiltrating, sending reports back to what was going on in the army. And at the state of emergency, the then second in command, Major Henry Christopher, sent for Rafiq Shah, Rex LaSalle, the third man, Mike Bazi, and gave instructions that they would be split up. One would go to the Coast Guard, to Nelson Island. One would go to the police headquarters, to the police. And one, I can't remember where the third one would go. But they split them up. And that's part of the whole Tobago. Because he was to go to Tobago. That created an intense pressure, and they revolted and said they're not going. They were then put under arrest by Captain Julian Spencer, and they attempted to shoot Major Christopher. And these things are not coming out, not coming out. Well, they were overpowered. Julian Spencer was shot in his hand, and they were taken to the regimental cells and put in the cells. And supposedly everything was over. But for months before, these three officers were speaking to their men. And there were problems. I know there were problems because we had in the Coast Guard the same problems. And they were talking to their men, and the men were disgusted. At Christmas that year, the men refused to eat their Christmas dinner. And that should have been the first signal. And then there were long lines of sick men every morning. Long lines. Some 70-odd soldiers every morning going sick. So there was a problem. And the men heard that these three officers were locked up, and bang. That's when it all started. The men decided they were going to free them, and they will tell us what to do. And they rushed the guard at the cells, freed the three officers, and then all hell broke loose. The soldiers were milling around. They didn't know what to do until Rafik Shah decided he would take charge, and they loaded every piece of weaponry the army had into a convoy. While this was going on, one of our Coast Guard men, and I cannot find out who he was at the sick bay down there. We all went to the same sick bay in Tetron. And he saw what was going on and ran over the hill from Tetron and told us, the Coast Guard, what was going on in Tetron. The electrician Toby, they tell him. He told the Coast Guard what was going on, and that was conveyed to Captain Bloom, who got on the phone and called Colonel Stanley Johnson, called everybody, and then he called his officers and told them what we must do. Now, there is a big difference. The Coast Guard worked. Every night, we would go to sea with the customs, later on with the police, doing anti-smuggling exercises. And so the Coast Guard was busy. They felt combat. They felt the excitement of there at night waiting for the enemy. They knew what action was. The army spent all their days drilling in Tetron Bay, day after day after day. And so the Coast Guard men had a different background to the army in 1970. Different background. We were working hard, stopping smugglers. In those days, there was no cocaine. We were stopping whiskey, a lot of whiskey. And then, a pirate started to interfere with Trinidad's fishermen. And this man started to make history. He was in the papers every day. Another fishing boat hijacked, engine gone. Another fisherman shot. Another fisherman lost his leg. And so it went on with this one pirate. And people and the papers started to say to us, what are you all doing? We're paying you all to stop this. How are you allowing this pirate to continue? But we weren't. We were frustrated. We were sending patrols out day, night, looking for this pirate. And then one afternoon out of the blue, and the reason I'm telling you this, is a fishing boat comes into Stowell's Bay and says, the pirate in 5 Islands. Well, That was a godsend to us. And Captain Bloom said for me, he said, take 2 men, get in a Boston whaler, get up there and get it. A Boston whaler is a small little boat, about 6 foot long. And guess who went? Del Shaw, Patrick Andre, and a man called Bisesa RC. Off we went to catch this terrible man who had been shooting up the dance. When we arrived, I never apologized to Paddy for this, but I will now. I said to Paddy, give me your submachine gun, and I took it from him. Because the officer in the Navy carries a pistol. When I was training later on in England, on the range, they gave me a pistol and the instructor said, this is what you do with a pistol, officers carry a pistol. So we all waited to say, oh yeah, that's it. He says, fire all the rounds up in the air quickly, and in the smoke that follows, throw the pistol at the enemy. Which tells you how useful a pistol is to an officer. So immediately, we saw the pirate. I told Paddy, give me a submachine gun. This thing is working. I had already fired 6 rounds and all missed. Paddy was a little upset with me, I could tell, but I took the submachine gun, and there, next to the 5 islands, was the pirate's boat, 3 men on board, and the pirate up on the land with a pair of binoculars, watching a convoy of fishing boats going down to Aquarium. And I said, this is the man, we have him. And then, pew, 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 all around the boat. And I was saying, what the hell is that going? This man throwing stones. I think it was Paddy that said, there's bullets coming. So he started to shoot at us. Anyway, I told Bisesa Singh and Paddy, get ashore, take up position on shore. Oh, Paddy didn't have no weapon. And there was this vicious man. I climbed up there, and while this was happening, the boat that they were sped away. And I said, we have this killer here, we have 2 of us, and only 1 weapon left to fire. Why? As the boat was going away, I picked up the submachine gun and I went, don't believe anything you see in the movies. It finished in about 3 seconds, and that was the end of that, and I didn't hit the damn thing. So I threw that to the bottom of the boat, climbed up on the island, and it was just me and Bisesa Singh, who was a sailor and had an SLR. So I grabbed the SLR from him, and I fired at the boat going away. Pow! Wood flying in the air. Pow! Wood flying in the air. And the boat took off down to Venezuela. That left me, Ali Andre, and Bisesa Singh, no ammunition for the other 2, and the pirate over there advancing on us. I grew up that evening at that time. I picked up the rifle and I said, this rifle is going to kill that pirate. Except every time I tried to fire the rifle, you see, officers don't use rifles. Officers were supposed to use a pistol. So I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And every time I tried to fire the rifle, I recocked it and the bullet flew out into the sea. And I did that 10 times until I realized, no more ammunition in this weapon. And the man coming at us. So a man called Bisesa Singh was next to me, and I said, Bisesa Singh, you want to die today? No, sir. I said, good, dive down there and get those rounds for me. And that man, without any fear, dived into the water and collected, I think, about 7 rounds of 7.62 ammunition. Came back up and said, look, them, sir. I said, get down, man. The man is waiting to shoot you. And he dropped to the ground and he gave me the rounds. He then explained to me that the SLR was jamming because of heating up the little boat going up to the business. It affected the mechanism of the fire, which he fixed right away, reloaded, and said, shoot now. So while we were there, I find I'm taking too long with this. While we were there, the man came out, he came behind a pillar like this to shoot at us, and I put the SLR on a block, watched at him and pulled the trigger, and I said, you go. Boom. Not so. I forgot one simple thing. When you point an SLR, it's going to hit. And it hit the pillar he was looking out from, dead set. So we didn't die. We were there, he was there, and I was convinced we were not going to die. Anyway, somebody was staying in one of the houses in Five Islands. And I had one last resort. I put a pack of flares in my pocket when I was leaving Stoughton State, and I fired off 2 red flares in the air. And somebody in the bar in the yacht club across the way saw the red flares. And they called David Bloom and said, we don't think it's anything, it's just fireworks. We just saw 2 red flares. But Bloom knew who he sent there and what he sent us for. And so the whole Coast Guard fleet was alerted. Because if he saw a flare, it meant we were trouble, either dead or in trouble. And the whole fleet at sunset, just like you see in the movies, came roaring up the Gulf, full speed ahead, and captured the pirate. And we felt like real heroes. But we did nothing, really. But we felt we were really heroes. Anyway, that's to explain Paddy Andre. Anytime I was in trouble, Paddy was there. Good, back to what I'm supposed to be saying. The problem with 1970 was that the Prime Minister gave direct instructions to then Colonel Surratt that no member of the Defense Force was to mention 1970 ever again. And so Bloom called all his officers and men and told us just that. You will not discuss 1970 forever. And that is exactly what happened. So he set up a commission of inquiry. The inquiry set. Nobody saw the results. He set up a second inquiry. They sat. That whole inquiry report was thrown away. So nobody knew what happened in 1970. Nobody. It occurred, but Eric Williams was adamant that it didn't exist. And that is where all the confusion came in. It was so bad, and I shouldn't be saying this now, my daughter was studying at UWI, and she decided in graduation she would write a thesis on the regimental mutiny of 1970. And she worked by investigating with every officer nearly who was involved in the whole affair, got their personal statements, and wrote a thesis on exactly what took place. When she presented the thesis to the professor in charge, he failed her. And he said, that could never be correct. All the things I've been reading in the papers and hearing all around are the right version. You got everything mixed up. And so even an effort to try and say the truth destroyed the young girl, and she had to change her mind and go right back and do another thesis to get through university. That is how bad this cone of silence was. And it's created a lot of problems since then, a lot of problems. If you say 1970, people say Captain Bloom. I had a house up in Blanchisseuse. I had a watchman. We used to talk, and he said, what about the Coast Guard? Or what about the white man I know who saved the country? I said, who's that? Captain David Bloom. David Bloom became the hero, and there you are. Because of this untruth. Right. Let us go directly to straight to April the 21st, 1970. This is what they told me to come here for. Eric Williams was a political prime minister of world stature. He wrote several books. He understood Trinidad, he understood the culture. He knew everything except military. He had no knowledge of military, didn't want one, and it was forced on him by the Commonwealth Commission as a condition to independence. So he said, okay, I'll have a little military, and he put them in Tetron Bay. Now, if you wanted to cite a military establishment in Trinidad and Tobago, that would be the last place you would choose, which proved itself. Only one way in, only one way out. And he put the Coast Guard over the hill next to it. So, because of a total lack of appreciation for the military that he had to have, we ended up in a pretty bad situation in 1970 when the same army, as he predicted, tried to overthrow the government. Because that's what they were about. This sailor of ours ran up, said here, there's chaos in Tetron, people are shooting weapons and whatnot, and then a strange thing happened. Lieutenant Commander Mervyn Williams, he was the captain of the Trinity, and I was the second in command. He ran out on the ship and he says, let's go. And away we went, round to Tetron Bay. No orders given, no nothing, he just went. While we were there, we saw shots being fired and we saw soldiers milling around. And he said to me, because my position on the ship then was in charge of the gun, he said, point of aim above the bunkers where all the ammunition is stored, fire. And I opened fire with what we call 2 clips, which is 8 rounds of 40-60 ammunition. And if you understand the 40-60 ammunition, you understand 1970. It wasn't designed to shoot at hills, to shoot at bunkers, to shoot at anything like that. The Bofors 40-60 was an anti-aircraft weapon that had a grazed nose fuse. It fired 200 rounds a minute, and it was designed to pierce an aircraft's skin, go inside the airplane and explode. Because if the fuse touched the thin part of the airplane, it would allow the shell to go inside and explode, and the airplane would crash. That is what we were fitted with. And so, to use a Bofor, or 40-60 as we called it, in 1970, against an army on a hillside, we have an anti-aircraft weapon. Anyway, at exactly 10 o'clock, the Coast Guard aircraft came over Stobel Street, and we had direct eyes on what was happening down in Tetron from the aircraft, who radioed the Coast Guard to say, convoy on the move. So the whole army, 2,000 hand grenades, hundreds of thousands of rounds of SLR ammunition, 200-300 SLRs were all in that convoy, heading up the hill. And at exactly 10 o'clock, the convoy came around the corner at the top. David Bloom sent for the commanding officer of the Trinity, who was not there. Everywhere we looked, we couldn't find the commanding officer of the Trinity, so he sent for me. And he said, Rich, you come in, take the Trinity out there, and stop them. I was flabbergasted. Remember, this is the same boy who saw the masses of people coming down the hillside the day before, and now a whole army coming at us in one little ship. I said, sir, why don't you go? I had no right to say that, and he could have locked me up. But that was me in those days. And he said to me, Rich, I'm an Englishman. You're a Trinidadian. It's better that you go. I said, but sir, I never captained a ship before in my life. He said, he'll do it today. So I went on board the ship, let the lines go, and off I went. Meanwhile, convoy coming down the hill with the whole army. Whole army. I was told to stop the convoy. On the way to the ship, he shouted to me. And he said, Rich, try and don't get to him. I saluted and went on board. But let me tell you something. I don't know how I'm still alive. Not because they shot me, but because I was so scared. I have never been so scared in all my life. And if somebody tells you about knees trembling, I know what it means. I know what it means. I was out there on the ship, gun loaded, and the one thing, again now, that saved me was a British Chief Petty Officer gunnery called Chief Aitken. And he was standing next to the gun. And all I was hearing on the repeater on the bridge is, forward gopher, locked and ready to fire, sir, gun half cocked, awaiting orders. And that shook me into my training immediately, that somebody could have such precise orders coming up to me. And I said, point of aim, 20 feet above the convoy, fire. And boy, boom, 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 off it went. The shells were going at the hillside and echoing on Centerby Island, and then bouncing on to Gaspery, and then bouncing back. So it sounded for every one, there were 4 booms. And if you'd never heard that, I could imagine what was going through the army on the hillside. It must have been terrifying. Anyway, we fired, the convoy came to a halt, and as it came to a halt, we were firing above them. But I decided, let me open the range, because they were de-bussing, taking up firing positions on the hillside at my ship. So I decided I would open the range, and when I did that, one of the rungs, because of the stern movement, dropped lower, hit a tree, and the shrapnel from the tree flew back with such force that it killed a soldier who was de-bussing from the tree. The sight of the soldier dropping dead on the hillside and the noise being made by the guns was enough to strike fear into all the army. And they decided there was only one thing to do, because we had put a bus across the road to block them from it. And they decided there was only one thing to do to get away from that monster that was shooting at us, was the reverse. And if you ever seen a convoy of trucks reversing at 50 miles an hour, that too is something you remember for the rest of your life. But a couple of diehards stayed. And when they saw their comrade on the ground, they decided, time for us to shoot. And they opened fire on the trip. My coxswain was a Barbadian called Granville Weeks. And I said, my God, Swain, what a day for rain to fall. And he looked at me and he said, rain, there is bullets. And there were bullets all around the ship. But the reason I told you the story of Paddy, Andre, and I is that prepared me for that morning. Because the first time an officer of the Defense Force came under direct fire. And I had had it with Paddy out there in the Gulf. And so that gave me the courage to say, seen this before, it didn't kill me, so I'll stay. Somehow, that fire stopped, and the whole convoy returned to Tetron. And in a nutshell, what you have there is the mutiny of 1970. They went back, but what people do not know is that was not the end. And some of the Coast Guard's finest hours is the conflict lasted for 10 days. And we were petrified that the army was coming out. And so the Coast Guard ships were in a circle between Stoble's Bay and Gaspery for 10 days. It got so bad that the officers on the bridge handling the ships couldn't stay awake for more than 20 minutes. So we got the Defense Force doctor to send, I don't know what he sent, but I know there were little red pills, and when we took them, we were awake again. And so we were living on these tablets by the Defense Force doctor, keeping these ships going wrong and wrong, day and night, day and night. Night was the worst terror, because you couldn't really see. But we knew they were there, and that we had to stop them. Anyway, the end of the whole matter was, Geoff Surratt was recalled from his retirement, and it was one of the demands of Shah Lasal and Bazi that they bring Surratt back. So the Prime Minister brought Surratt back, made him a colonel, and told him go down to Tetron and sort out the ordnance. And Surratt went. came back, he lined up all the troops, he spoke to them, went, came back, and then he told us, the Prime Minister said, enough, you all have been negotiating, talking, this is the end. Go down there and tell Mr. Shah to hand over the keys to the bunker and all the ammunition, or you will have to stand the consequences. The consequences were discussed the night before that order on board the Coast Guard ships, where Bloom had a conference with his officers. And those consequences were, Seret had 2 code words. He could send on the radio to the Coast Guard that the washing is clean, which meant Shah had surrendered and given him the keys to the bunker and all the ammunition, or that the washing was dirty. And that meant he refused, and we were to take charge. This is unknown to Trinidad and Tobago. He had a conference, he told the officers, we are going to die, but what we have to do is to go into Tetron, we have to flatten it totally and kill everyone. Those who don't want to take part, I've given you the opportunity to go home. Those who will stay with me, we will stay here and defend Trinidad. And not one member of the crew refused. In fact, we couldn't take all, but all the members of the Coast Guard sailors wanted to come. And we had to choose now which ones we would take. But both ships, we threw things in the sea you wouldn't believe. I personally threw 2 cases of whiskey off. Everything the ships had that were useless, we threw in the sea, loaded it with ammunition, and prepared off Stokes Bay to listen for the code words. And we saw Seret's car driving in to Tetron 10 days after the 21st. Went over the hill down into Tetron, and we all in the radio room, around the radio. And after, my heart nearly stopped. I heard a crackling, and then Seret's voice saying, the washing is clean. And that was the end of 1970 military mutiny. But I can assure you, my brother wrote a book. He was a military historian. He wrote 2 books. He wrote a book called 10 Days in April. He first took it to a lawyer in town, and the lawyer said, let me see that. He read through some of the chapters, and he said, give me that. Seized it and said, if you ever publish this, you'll spend the rest of your life paying money for people, for defamation of character. People will put you in jail for lying. You will go through hell. Give it to me and I will keep it. That lawyer still has that book. And that is the truth of 1970. Someday, maybe it might become Trinidad's real history, not the nonsense that has been floating around. I have stepped out of line here today, and I have told you the actual true facts that went on. But nobody knows. Only 3 medals were given out on that day. Bloom, Williams, and Williams, 3 medals, 7. Nobody else got a medal. And the result of that, you wouldn't believe, was horrendous. The Coast Guard had saved the country to a man. Not one man went sick or missing. Everybody reported for duty, and I can still see them lying on the blackened decks at night as we cruised around, filled with speed, I think the tablets were called, keeping the ships in position. Not one refused to carry out orders or do his duty. For that, 10 officers of that same unit resigned right after 1970. The executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Goldstraw, went home in disgust because he was hearing all this foolishness that went on, and he knew the truth. Meanwhile, let me tell you about one more before I put this down. My first duty that day was to guard the political detainees in the classroom in Stokes. And the reason I tell you this is the reason why Goldstraw resigned. Up all of these Black Power leaders in the Coast Guard's classroom, and they sent one recruit I don't know if he's here today. His name is Evans Lee. Irvin Lee. And they sent Lee to protect me. And I was the officer in charge of all of these detainees. And after the time went on and they got accustomed to the military and they got accustomed to me and that man sitting there, a man whose name I will not call, got up from the masses and walked towards me. And he said, I will repeat his words, little white boy, we will hang you in the square tomorrow. You see that pistol you have? Give it to me. And he walked up to me. I'm the officer. What did I tell you about shaking knees? My knees were trembling. And you could see that. Because there's these people in charge of the mob I had seen the day before. I was absolutely petrified. And he walked right up the classroom to me. And when he got within about 3 feet, a little Coast Guard recruit, Irvin Lee, jumped up. The SLR had a bayonet on it, and he put the bayonet under the man's chin, and the blood started to flow. And he was trembling so much that the magazine was rattling in the SLR. And he said to him, if you only sneeze and pull the trigger. End of story. He said, okay, I'm only joking, and he sat down. That is the caliber of men we had in the Coast Guard. And he was only a recruit, not a seasoned person. But we were different in the Coast Guard. We had a formation of men who were the Marine Police. And the big thing in the Navy is all the senior men would guide the young men as they come in. And we had this group of ex-Marine Police who kept all our young sailors steady, following orders, and doing the right thing. And that was the difference between us and the Army. And that gave us the discipline that not a man backed down. And little Evans Lee with his shaking rifle saved me and probably a whole bunch of people. So there you have it. That's why I feel the Coast Guard didn't get its deserves. My brother told David Bloom in front of me, every man in the Coast Guard should get a duty cert. And he said, nonsense, never heard of that. But he got one. He got one for stopping the convoy. So there's the story of 1970. If there's anything that's bothering you, Sheriff told me you could ask questions if you want to ask her. I might answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiralty. God bless you. And next up again, he's the only Admiral in this country. 3 cheers. Hip, hip, hip. Hip, hip, hip. Hip, hip, hip. Work hard for it. Only Admiral in this country. Praise the Lord. Admiral, sir, thank you very much. May God bless you, preserve you, give you health and strength to carry on very smartly. And then the whole country, the whole world will receive. Thank you very much. May God bless you. Thank you very much for your time. Okay? At this point in time, I give you flow for 5 minutes. Anybody to ask any questions? Yeah, shoot him in.
Who shot Bloom?
Who shot?
Bloom.
I mean, who shot Commander Bloom? Captain Bloom? Oh, that's Bloom. Yeah, good question.
What part of the world?
I prefer not say. I prefer not say. I'm not saying.
The answer is very clear. The police claim to kill both men who shot June in the Gomati. We know different.
We know better.
I just might add, perhaps the code of silence did not allow me to become public for some 10 or 15 years later as the man who fired at the convoy, else I would have been shot.
Thank you. Yeah, look.
We are going to
What? What?
The admiral tells him he read the book, tells him, Royal Group, and he could write that book down.
Yeah, he could write one.
Did I write the book, read the book?
Yes, sir.
I studied it.
You write one.
He isn't the only military historian in Trinidad for joke. And what he wrote was the absolute truth. And I have in my possession right now his original chronological order of time of every event that took place on the morning of April the 21st. He wrote it. Publish it?
No.
A Close Run Thing by Gaylord Kelshaw. Everything is there except the real names and the real people who stole all the glory. And still, nothing was changed. Nothing was changed in the Defense Force. And the young officers left, and the people who were there, who caused the mutiny, remained.
Once are you writing a book?
I don't have the brains.
Sir, what is the story that you tell from the museum? That story.
You're not going to blame me for that. In the military museum, there's a table that was a dining room table in the wardroom. And when the army was stopped, David Bloom told the captain of the Trinity to take us close to the wardroom in Strobel's Bay where the officers entered. And I again reverted to the head in charge of the gun. And he said, bring the hillside down on the corner, right on that corner in Strobel's Bay. And I tried my best. But I missed, and I hit the wardrobe and destroyed all the officers' liquors in the wardrobe. And there's a hole in that table to today where a piece of shrapnel passed through it. And that is the story of that. I wasn't a very popular man in the coast.
Thank you, Lord. Stand up on the horse's mouth. Any more questions? Yes.
This question may be beyond your scope, I'm not sure, but would mutineers ever try to treason? If they were, why wasn't their punishment more severe?
Very technical question that I'm not really versed to answer. There was a court martial, they were found guilty, and they was given sentences up to 15, 20 years in prison. But I can't say these things. There was some disagreement with the person, the judge, who was from Nigeria. And they found that Seret had told all the men, don't worry, we're not going to trouble you, just surrender. And that means there was what we call in the military condemnation. So the senior officer cleared the men of any action, and because he did that, we couldn't hold them in cells, and so they were all released. And that's the reason why they got it.
What about the incident that the HQ of jamming the concert? And the action by the advisor? The incident, the administration jammed, and the action that the advisor took about the Trinity. When? When shelling on the hill. What action did you do? Good afternoon. During the actual confrontations, and they were fired, we go forward. One of the rounds jammed. And everybody said they're dead. Oh, you're talking about something else? Yeah. And the actions.
That's one of the great heroes of 1970. He's talking about Lieutenant Commander Donald Muhammad. He was a sailor on the Trinity with me that day, and he was in charge of the gun. What people didn't know, especially the Army, is the Coast Guard just wasn't fooling around. Months and months before, we were out in the Gulf, and we were throwing oil drums over the side, pulling back a mile, and then training the gun crews to hit the drum floating in the water. And I was, the first Lieutenant Bloom was in command of the Trinity, and I was attending to the gun, and we were doing a shoot. And Bloom said, "Richard, you did very well today, let's go home." And I said, "I have 4 clips, or 4 rounds left in the clip. Could I fire them off, please, sir?" He said, "Go ahead." Boom, 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 3. And then click. I'm the officer, I must know. 1 round didn't go off. And it was in the barrel, and the barrel was red hot. And the book says, the instructions are, point the barrel up in the air straight, get everybody off the gun and go to the back of the ship and leave it there for 20 minutes and wait and see if it cools off. Those are the instructions. So I shouted to the gun's crew, "Clear the mountain." And the man on the lever of the breech of the gun thought he heard, "Clear the gun." And he pulled the breech open, and out hissing came a high explosive shell onto the deck in front of me. From the barrel, from the red hot barrel, and you could actually see steam coming off of it. And I, as the officer, supposed to know what to do. But I stood there like this. And Donald Muhammad stepped forward. One of my men put his hand on the red hot shell, picked it up, and threw it over the side. And we heard boom. And Bloom said, "What was that, Rich?" "Nothing, sir, we must have hit something." But Donald Muhammad saved me, the men around us, and the whole ship. That's the caliber of men we got.
Well done, Saka.
One more. Yeah. One more. The admiral said that 10 officers resigned after 9 September. Not about you, but how much officers remain after 9 September? Original.
What officers remain after 9 September?
Yeah, what happened is it created a serious distrust of young men. And in order to fill the gaps quickly, petty officers and sergeants in the army were immediately promoted to officers to fill the gaps. But the government had lost total confidence in all the young people. And that is one of the things that I still have burning inside me with Rafiq Shah. He never apologized. He never said he did anything wrong. You know, he just didn't even notice that he had wrecked the army and wrecked people like me who had to stay on because nobody trusted young people anymore. And he broke that trust. And the whole army and Coast Guard changed because chiefs and petty officers joined the wardroom, and in the army, sergeants went in. So there was no real change in things. There was always officers.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I want to commend the Admiral for the story. And I mean, I was gripped throughout, I want to say that. But I have so many questions, I don't know where to start, but I'll just ask a quick one. One is, what was the relationship between the police, the army, and the Coast Guard up to 1970? And the second part of that question, did it change and how did it change?
That is a key question, and I'm not mentioning it. What happened was, as I said, the Coast Guard started with the whole Marine police coming across. And David Bloom was the superintendent of police that was in charge of the Marine branch. And David Bloom was a policeman. And so we developed such a tremendous relationship with the police officers. They would come to lunch, we would go to lunch, they would come and shoot, we would shoot, they would come to our sports days. The police loved us. And because the police had special branch in the army, They didn't like the Army at all, at all, at all. They heard the stories coming out of the Army. And that's where the Coast Guard felt strong, because we knew the police were with us. And that is the answer to your question. After 1970, all of that changed. All of that changed. Because the whole dynamic changed. And we left, the police drew away from the whole defense force. Because we changed from being Coast Guard, Army, Geoff Surratt called us one defense force. And so we were brought together, and he was the commander of the defense force. And the police wanted no part of that. They wanted us separate, and we enjoyed being separate to the Army. But it never came back. The whole Coast Guard changed. It never was the same again. Good question, sir.
Thank you very much. Before it goes off, anything I get questions? Yes.
Just one question is, there was talk going around that the year before the anniversary, that the soldiers didn't have their dinner, the normal annual dinner, that they refused to have their dinner, so there was some sort of rift. I'm just trying to figure out if that was true. That is one question. Second thing is, question I'm actually asking is, the members, the regular officers, this is what we heard, the regular officers and the officers that were sent to Sandals, which was younger officers, that there was some sort of between those two. Just want to confirm that.
You're asking the difference between the officers from Sanders and the officers of the Coast Guard?
No, the young officer that was sent to Sanders.
Yes.
And the older officer, the regular.
Yes.
Who never went to Sanders.
No, that's the cause. That was the cause. You had these bright young ones. Listen, you people are brighter than me. And you're asking some questions here that are at the core of the thing. Sanders Royal Military Academy has a major fault. And we sent young officers there. But do you know what? All the officers that go up there come back and take over their countries. And the officers that the government brought here from Nigeria, Ghana, and whatnot, to sit on the court-martial, went back home and took over their countries. There was something wrong with what the Army is teaching in Sanders. In the Coast Guard, but you could stop there. In the history of Navy, no naval officer has ever gone against his superior. And there's the difference, Army versus Coast. Answer your question?
Thank you very much, sir.
Remember all these people that they brought in, they were a scheme, eh? The scheme was, we would hire short service officers to hold the fort while people like me and the young Army officers went away to different military colleges, trained up, came back, then these people would resign and the professionals would take over. Huh. That was somebody's dream. 14 years after, those people were still there and the young professionals weren't promoted and could not. I reached the rank of Lieutenant Commander and one of the first short service officers was there and they chose him over me to be the commanding officer of the Coast Guard. So the scheme just didn't work and people who were not trained had no military, some of them stayed on and even became Chief of Defense Staff.
Call him, Abu Wesson. Call him.
Sheriff, could I ask one more question? Could I ask one more question? Yeah. There's a narrative that one of the reasons for the mutiny was that the Army did not want to go into Port of Spain and shoot against people in the street who were rebelling against the government. But the narrative of the Admiral Kelcher indicates that the Army were really involved in some kind of plot 4 months prior to April 21st. And I want to ask a question from your point of view, your story. Was there a connection between what was happening in the military and what was happening among the leaders who led the movement to the street?
Absolutely correct. There was constant contact. And where were they going with all those rifles, hand grenades, and weapons? You know where those weapons were found? In the ambulance taking the body of Private Bailey who died going to town. They hid the weapons in the ambulance. And the plan was to go to Camp Ogden in Port of Spain. And there they would muster. At the same time, there was a massive rally in town. Same day. What you could see right there? It's too coincidental. The thing, it happened on the spur of the moment, but they had already conveyed to outside, we coming.
But was there long-term planning and long-term connection prior to?
Long before 1970 mutiny, the young officers of the army used to meet and discuss the political situation. They would have secret meetings, and it went on for a long time. But as I said, Special Branch was listening, and they knew what they were thinking, and they mistrusted the army. Remember what I told you? The army wasn't told there was going to be a state of emergency. The Coast Guard knew. But when the army buses were going in, they were wondering what the hell going on in the Coast Guard. Look at all these men in battle dress. They didn't trust the army because of that.
One more question, sir.
I see we have some policemen here.
One more question, sir. What role did the Governor General play during the coup? What role did the Governor General play?
Governor General.
He wasn't here, he was out of the country, so Solomon Ochoa. There was an acting Governor General at the time, and he was protected in President's house for the jury.
Why so many names missing from the list?
Good day, everyone. I wasn't there in 1970. However, I was born, yes. However, I joined the Coast in 1985. I was 17 when I joined. I remember watching one of my instructors here today, Mr. Bihari, telling them, those of them who were 7 days to 18, keep it. And I was proud to say I spent 32 years in the Coast Guard. But my question to you, Real Grant and Johnson, now that I hear your story, I now have a better understanding how you were prepared for 1990. Because I was there in 1990, I just twist a little bit, and you handled it from the Coast Guard aspect of it, excellent. So I see that you had a dry run in 70, prepared for 90. I just want to make a little twist from 70 to 90. I must say I'm proud to be a sailor. I have worked in the Coast Guard for 32 years. I'm happy to be here today to see my instructors, some of them still here, and come so I work with and sail with. And if anybody have the youths coming up, the military, especially the Coast Guard, the foundation that should be, but the old Coast Guard, sir, I beg that somehow, some way, the Coast Guard went adrift. If we, the older ones here, could start talking to the generation in the Coast Guard right now, they'll bring it back to where it's supposed to be. All these senior members here, you also have a role to play. I don't know if anybody will listen, but you all have a, I want some senior members here that if we come back now and only listen to you all, the Coast Guard have a chance to come afloat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Rear Admiral Casual, sir, Lieutenant Andrew, and of course, High Command, and everybody else gathered. My name is Lieutenant Commander Mike Just have one question, sir, if you please. Every year, as you rightfully said, we hear one narrative. And the narrative comes out of the very same people who perpetuated the mutiny, as they call it. And in that narrative, Rafiq Shah constantly styles himself as the peacemaker. And he says that almost every year, I'm sure everybody here will testify to that, and we need only replay some of his clips to understand what he says and to hear from his own words. And what he says is this: he was the one who de-escalated the situation by refusing to fire the Carl Gustavs. Now, I understand the weapon system. Many military members here understand the weapon system. But I would like you, sir, to please shed some light on this narrative that he was the peacemaker and he himself de-escalated the situation by refusing to fire the Carl Gustav weapon system on the Coast Guard ships.
Easy. The Carl Gustavs is an anti-tank weapon that fires a rocket and was used, in fact, in 1990 against the Red House and TTT. That's the time when the Army did use the Carl Gustav. But in 1970, there was an officer called Captain David Dockwell, who was the head of the training wing of the Army. And he was very loyal, and when he heard what the young officers were going on with, he removed the firing pins of the Carl Gustavs and disabled the general purpose machine guns in the Army bunker. So we have heard, and I have sat back and listened to Rafiq Shah with his nonsense about he would blow the Coast Guard patrol boat out of the water, and he didn't do so. He was a coward, and they ran back to base. And as we say in the days now, who make the most goals win.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mr. Mohammed. Mr. Mohammed. On that morning, Mr. Rafiq Shah put white flag on the van, the center of Mr. Bloom, asking for peace, right? And he put on his arms. On that morning. Rafiq Shah put white flag on the van. Right, I just want to testify Mr. Kelshall there. I was on the ship with Mr. Kelshall that morning. Yeah. When the convoy coming down. When Mr. Kelshall was firing on the hill. When you were firing on the hill. Yes, he was there. You were firing at Mr. Rafiq Shah.
The amount of nonsense that Mr. Shah has spoken since 1970 mind boggles me. And he was also the editor of the Bomb newspaper. And every Saturday it used to come out. And we all had to keep quiet because we were told not to say so. He claimed, and we stopped firing. Remember, the Coast Guard guns stopped firing when the ambulance came. Because we were not allowed to shoot at an ambulance. And that is how it went to Port of Spain with the body and the weapons. But there was no white flag anywhere.
On his jeep, on the van, when he sent to Mr. Bloom.
Well, my eyes must see ain't good. I didn't see no white flag.
Come in front.
White flag.
Okay, thank you. Basically, it's a statement, right? First, I really appreciate the effort made by you all to have this exercise done. Secondly, I'm really impressed with the candid nature of your delivery. Basically, honest. The point I want to make is this. The sugar workers have decided to return a visit to Cuba on April 24th. and they were assembling in spite of police beatings and coming to Port of Spain to Woodford Square to embrace their African brothers and sisters who had visited them under the banner of Africans and Indians Unite. And that is a factor that would have and should have been considered in relationship to the considerations employed by the military in not wanting to go and shoot down their own people.
That is absolutely true, and that's why I started out saying it had the potential to be a terrible thing, but restraint on both sides stopped that from happening. I don't want to go into no argument with Mr. Shah. I just know I saw people running and leaving the scene. Good leaders don't do that. Good leaders don't do that. And I promise you that if the sergeants of the army were part of that mutiny, they would have burst through that barricade and gone into town.
Yes, sir, and that's exactly what I was waiting on to comment on. Because I heard that the sergeant's mess of the regiment had no part in the mutiny. And as a result of that, the mutiny collapsed.
Introduced to one of them. Rob Zalani, an army sergeant. Hello? Hello? There was an army sergeant called Rock Salani who rose in the ranks of the army to become a colonel when he started off as a sergeant. And on the morning of 1970, Rafiq Shah put a weapon to his head and said, "Sarge, you're with us or you're against us," with our SLR pointing to his head. And he looked at Rafiq Shah and he said, "I'm not with you." And that tells you the strength of the sergeants. That any man would look at an SLR and say, "Do what you want, but I'm not joining you." That was the method of the sergeants.
That's it?
Yes, sir. That's it.
That's it. Thank you very much. And also, thank you very much for this course. Thank you very much. At this point in time, I would like to ask, I know it's getting late, and the food is getting cold. Thank everybody who supported the food, supported the environment, clean the environment and everything. At this point in time, I want to call Dr. Faria Mohammed to give you a task. And Dr. Nusrin.
Just before I leave, no speech. I just want to present Sheriff with a certificate. He is what is known as a plank owner of the Coast Guard. That is a tradition in the Navy of a person who is present when the ship is launched. And he was one of the first intake in the Coast Guard. There are only 3 left. And he's one with us here today. So I am giving him a certificate as a plank owner of the Trinidad Coast Guard.
Let's get our hand